Welcome, brave souls, to the first spine-tingling episode of Whispers in the Dark, where the line between reality and the supernatural fades into the shadows. Let us guide you through the unknown realms where ghosts, ghouls, and the inexplicable awaits. In tonight's episode, we unravel one of Hollywood's most haunting mysteries, the tragic and unsolved case of Elizabeth Short, known to the world as the Black Dahlia. So dim the lights, keep a flashlight close, and join us as we journey beyond the veil and into the heart of the unknown. Whispers in the Dark starts now, if you dare.
How you doing today, Hugo?
I'm doing good. How you doing, John?
I'm doing well. Just got off work. And I'm excited to get this thing started. Today's our first episode. It's a big one. Now, Hugo, what do you know about the Black Dahlia murder case?
Honestly, not much, man. I don't remember too much about it besides it was a lady who was murdered, and basically she was chopped in half and basically ripped to shreds, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And I honestly don't know that much about it.
All right. Well, the very first thing I want to let you know is this case was incredibly big. It was huge. The media ate it and ran with it. It was the main story in LA for months, for around a month, weeks. It was a top headline, and there was such a big race to be the first and to have the latest details that at some point, this is actually a really messed up fact that people don't know about, but there was a newspaper based in LA that called Elizabeth Short, that's her real name, the Black Dahlia was Elizabeth Short. They called Elizabeth's mom, and they were like, hey, your daughter just won a beauty contest. And the mom got all excited and happy, and they were like, can we get all this background information? Can we get her story of who she is, who her friends are, where she came from? It wasn't until later that the mom found out that her daughter was dead during that phone call.
Yeah, I remember that. I think they said that to get all her personal information, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
find out more about her. The
now
murderers.
that's illegal to do such things.
Oh yeah.
Press is not allowed to talk to family members until the names are released. Yeah, but that's the mom. That has to be an awful feeling. You're feeling super proud that your daughter is finally making a name for herself, doing well, and then you just find out she was brutally murdered.
Murdered.
So let me tell you a little bit of something about Elizabeth, so you get to know her a little bit better. She was born in the East Coast in Massachusetts, I think Boston. She lived in a smaller town in the Massachusetts area. Something about her is that her own father faked his own suicide because he had a failing business. So he faked the suicide and just moved to the West Coast and completely left the mom by herself with 5 kids. That kind of
remember that detail.
That kind of really messed up the family dynamic. So Elizabeth, as soon as she turned 18, she dropped out of high school and she just wanted to get away. But what that happened there was her dad contacted them when she was around that age, explaining what happened. So Elizabeth wanted just to move out of there, moved in with her dad. It didn't end well. It only lasted like around a year. They fought a lot. So Elizabeth left, and she started working as many jobs as she could. Eventually, she ended up in Florida, where she met a young guy who was in the military. He was a pilot. The young man's name was Matthew Michael Gordon Jr. They started dating. They began a relationship. But around this time, it was 1942 and 1943. World War II was happening, so he got sent over. So after he was sent over to India, his plane crashed, and while he was recovering from his injuries in the hospital, he sent a letter to Elizabeth asking for her hand in marriage. Now, Elizabeth completely joys, and it's one of the first times in her life that she's been completely happy. She says, yes, I will marry you. They never saw each other again because the pilot crashed
in the war
again. So that must have been a huge blow for her. After that, she wanted to move out of Florida. She ended up in LA, where she became something known of as a couch drifter. She stayed where she could, she stayed with friends, she did whatever she could to make ends meet. That's kind of where we now pick up the story. So,
And you know what? I'm curious. I think it's important to know. I don't know if we have the information on hand or not, but how old was she during the time of her moving out and moving in with her dad and her meeting this guy? Like how much time elapsed on there roughly? And how old was she around those years?
from 18 years old is when she dropped out of high school and moved into her dad. When she passed away, when she was murdered, she was 22.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I'm not sure if
So
you mentioned that.
yeah, no,
That would
it's
be an
those
interesting.
4 years. She moved in. She didn't have a stable place to call home. She just kept moving. Yeah. So the day her body was found, it was January 15th, around 10 a.m. A young woman is walking her young daughter. They're going to a shoe store. Just a normal day for them, just doing some tasks, some chores. The young lady, her name was Betty. She passed by a street and an empty lot, like an abandoned lot, where people would dump some trash. Now, this is around South Central. So at that time, South Central was mostly middle-income white people living in that area. So they're just walking in, and she sees out of the corner of her eye something laying on the lot. It's not hidden. Clearly, whoever put that there wanted to be found. It was right next to the sidewalk, a couple inches, maybe 20 inches from the sidewalk. The body was there, but she didn't think it
Could
was a
say it was a
body.
morbid calling card.
Yeah, we'll get into that later. We'll get into that. Maybe it was a calling card.
Oh, okay.
So the body was super close to the sidewalk. But at first, she thought it was a mannequin because it was so white. It didn't even look human anymore. But after getting a closer look, turns out it was Elizabeth Short. Her body was completely nude, split at the waist. Her intestines were piled up to her lower body. Her lower extremities, her legs were opened. Her genitals were extremely damaged, like gruesomely gory, mutilated. Yeah, it was quite a sight. But she was never really, like the coroner said that she wasn't penetrated, so it wasn't like a rape. It was just like a torture thing. And why do I say it was torture? Well, because it was found that she had been tied up in her wrist, leg, neck, thigh. She was tied up. She was she also had slits on her mouth, like the Joker.
Look, Joker, I guess you could say.
Completely opened up, so it gave her this like wicked smile.
Wow.
It was a very gruesome. She was definitely tortured. Think about it. That her body was completely drained of blood. Someone murdered her, cleaned her body because there was no blood on her at all. Cleaned her body with gasoline, so there was no fingerprints either, and moved it there.
Do we know if because to me it sounds like this could have been like maybe a ritual killing aside from just the guy finding personal pleasure in the actions he committed. But do we know by any chance if this was like anything involved with witchcraft or ritualized killings? This kind of sounds like it would be based on the draining of the blood.
Maybe, yeah. She also has some chunks of her flesh missing, and I believe she has some damage on her breast areas.
Wow. Cannibalism, maybe?
I don't know. I have a few theories, and I'm gonna run them to you towards the end, and I want you to think what happened. But yeah, so they called the police. They showed up. They took some photos. That you can look them online. They're pretty gruesome photos. That honestly, I made me feel a little uneasy watching those photos. I might put them
Yeah.
here on the video, and
Okay.
I'm gonna blur some things out. But yeah, no, was it was something that shocked the entire area, and it quickly gained a lot
Yeah.
of traction. But people found out who she was really quickly. They found out it was Elizabeth Short, and then some newspapers started calling her the Black Dahlia because of her fashion sense. She would wear all this sleek, super nice black clothing, and it just kind of blew up, and it took a life of its own. And how I mentioned earlier that the newspapers did whatever they could to get information. Now,
Well, yeah. I mean, I assume it would blow up because during this period, you wouldn't really hear too much about things like that going on. I mean, I guess the closest thing to that would be basically the stories you hear from overseas over war. People really getting into firefights, things blowing up in their face, or people stepping on landmines, stuff like that.
yeah,
So it would make sense that something this crazy would spread that big and that fast.
no, and another thing, she was tortured when she was alive because her slits were done when she was still alive. She died from a blow to the head, and she like bled out in her
Oh
brain.
wow.
So that was the cause of death. Now, 9 days after her body was found, a newspaper received an envelope with Elizabeth Short's belongings, like her social security number, her address book with some pages missing, some photos. So the killer was definitely wanting some attention here.
Yeah.
Because you
Yeah,
don't do that
definitely.
kind of thing and just leave it there if you don't want some kind of attention.
Yeah. And besides, if he left some of the things behind, then that means he also didn't do it to steal anything from her.
Mm,
I think that might be important too,
yeah.
to jog down in memory.
Now, the envelope had was addressed by when you were a little kid, you would like cut out letters from the newspapers and glue them together to spell something out.
Oh yeah.
That's how it was
Kind of
addressed.
ransom
So
card.
yeah, everything was scrubbed with gasoline for fingerprints. So there was
I remember hearing that
nothing to
detail.
match. Yeah, it was. Um, they were signed as the Black Dahlia Avenger. That's how they were signed. So
Oh yeah.
I don't understand what was going through this person's head. I don't know if it was the actual murder or it was someone who just wanted some attention. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think those letters were sent by the actual murderer or someone else?
Well, honestly, looking at it from that perspective, I think there's the possibility it was sent by the murderer, because clearly, if he left the body out, just where everyone could see it, all messed up and displayed, he wanted attention. So it would seem like if those letters were sent by anyone, it could have been by him. I mean, this could be him trying to get his, if you will, 5 minutes of fame, And of
Yeah.
course, repeatedly, because he did one event, then he did another event right after. So this is, my opinion. Obviously, this is someone mentally ill, but this is someone extremely mentally ill. So based on
Yeah.
those little facts, I think it probably was him. Sounds like
So
it.
the police uh did a lot. The police, I'm gonna give them credit, did quite a thorough investigation. Although at some places they really dropped the ball. I'll get into those later. So they took some names from the address book that was found, and they questioned around 70 plus 75, I think, men from the address book. Most of them denied knowing Elizabeth that well. Most of them said, oh, we just went on a couple dates here and there, first date sinners. That was the what most people said. So it looked like Elizabeth will be in LA, did have quite a social life. She went on many dates. She was described as a very beautiful and attractive young woman.
Yeah. I've seen the pictures, and she really was a standout, if you will. Very beautiful
Yeah.
gal.
So it's been 77 years since this murder took place, and the case has gone cold. But there's plenty of theories out there of who could have done it. So I'm gonna tell you right now some of the suspects, and I want you to tell me what you honestly think. If you think it's possible or they're definitely not it. So first, before I go into my suspects, I want to go into a statement made by a detective.
Yeah.
So in 1997, actually, it was the 50th year of the murder. A newspaper, I believe it was the LA Times, interviewed a detective. That it was the last living detective from the original investigation, and the detective said, "Oh, hey, within a few weeks, I knew who it was. I knew who it was because I received some tips about a man who was standing there. I got some descriptions. I got a description of a car. It was a black car. So, and I tracked him down, and I knew it was him, but I couldn't get anything on him, so I couldn't do anything on him. It was just my gut, but I knew it was him. He never revealed who that person was, but the detective says I knew who it was, and I couldn't do anything about it." So that's what he said. It was the last living. So for me, that sounds like for 50 years I knew who it was, but I'm such a crappy detective. I couldn't get anything on him. I couldn't even get him in to question him or anything. I don't know. It just seems like he's just covering his own butt right there. So the first suspect I'm gonna talk to you about is someone named Mark Hansen. Have you heard of him?
No, never.
Okay. So Mark Hansen was kind of a big thing in that time in LA. He was a Danish millionaire, and he operated a dance club in LA. I believe the name of that club was like the Florentine Gardens, something like that. That was where the young hip place to go. Like, celebrities would go there, movie stars, people who wanted to be movie stars. It was the go-to place, and he owned it. He also owned a house where Elizabeth lived for the better part of several months. From, I believe, May to like November. That's where she lived there. She did live there with some roommates. But here's where the story gets interesting. It was found out that Mark Hansen had a huge thing. He was obsessed with Elizabeth. Like, he wanted her. Everyone knew. He made several advances to her, and she always shut him down with, "Oh, I'm a virgin. I can't do that." And that just kind of made him want Elizabeth even more.
The old I'm a virgin trick.
Yeah, it got so bad, the obsession, that Mark told Elizabeth, "Hey, you're not allowed to bring any guys to the house anymore. I don't care." So that's a little possessive, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Elizabeth and Mark had a fallout in November. It was about, obviously she not wanted him and everything. The fallout got so bad that Mark evicted Elizabeth from that house.
Dang.
So that was in around November, and she went to San Diego, up and down San Diego, LA. She was drifting, sleeping in couches. So the thing is, on the night before the murder happened, she called the house, and she spoke to a roommate. I believe the roommate's name was Ruth, but don't quote me on that. She spoke to the roommate, and she spoke to Mark. The roommate was told that she was gonna come back. Like, Elizabeth said, "I'm gonna come back." Mark told Elizabeth, "You have a place to stay here. Don't worry about it. Everything's fine." Elizabeth never made it. She never showed up.
Crazy.
So that put a big finger on Mark, right? Because during the investigation, Mark denied he ever talked to Elizabeth, even though there was proof. And also, Mark denied that he ever wanted her sexually, and everyone knew that was a lie. So he lied, and a little bad for Mark, but Mark had very good alibis, because during the time of the murder, he was in a theater across town. So a lot of people saw him in the theater, so he was off the clear, basically. So the cops cleared him. But I don't know. Do you think there's a possibility Mark Hansen was a murderer?
Yeah, it does to me. It sounds to me that there could be that possibility. Let's say along the lines of a jealous boyfriend, which obviously he wasn't. But based on what you told me here, he was possessive. He wanted her for himself. Uh, Though I'm not sure if this is what happened, I'm just throwing this out there. It could be that he hired someone else to take care of her with specific instructions. And then he went to some place where he knew he would be busy, and people could see him. And then, basically the fault would be taken off of him. Could be, could be.
Okay,
But I
so
don't know too
that's
much about
very
the case.
possible. But look, let's say if you're hiring someone to kill someone, wouldn't you want that body disposed on a completely different manner than her body was found?
You could be. It could be, but if he's that obsessed with her, maybe he's trying to say, hey, you know what? She did not want me, so this is my revenge towards her. It could be that he was so obsessed with her to the point that he's like, this is her punishment for not wanting to involve me in her life. Could be.
Okay, okay.
That's
All
one
right.
possibility.
Now we're going to our second suspect.
Okay.
It's another person in the army. His name was Robert Manley, but everyone called him Red. That was his nickname. So Robert even said himself, I met Elizabeth outside of a bus station. I offered her a ride. She kept ignoring me, but he was very persistent. It was a beautiful young lady. He was very interested. Eventually, he kept insisting. Eventually, she said yes. So they got on the car. They drove to wherever the destination was. They started seeing each other, every time he was in town, because he was a traveling salesman. He wasn't always in that same town. Every time he was in the same town as Elizabeth, they would hang out, go to dinner, go on a date. This happened a month before her murder, so they didn't know each other that long. So for that month, they were like dating each other and seeing each other. So basically, at some point, Elizabeth was in San Diego, and her place there didn't want her anymore. I'm not sure what the situation was, but her living conditions in San Diego were no longer viable. She called Robert, be like, hey, can you come pick me up? He did. He went and picked her up. They stayed at a motel for a night. And after that night, they drove to LA. Around 6:30 in the evening, they arrived to LA, and Robert drops off Elizabeth at the Bitmore Hotel on January 9th in the evening. That is said to be the last time she was seen alive. Well, they dropped her off. That was the last time Robert saw her alive. She was later seen alive at around 10 when she left the hotel. A bellhop said they opened a door for her. So that day, it was the last day she was seen alive, January 9th. Mark Roberts says he dropped her off at 6:30 and he left.
Yeah.
Now, Robert, during the investigation, he was willing to do anything the police asked for the investigation. He was willing to take 2 lie detector tests. So he passed them both. A couple years later, after the murder happened, he even took what's called a truth serum. It doesn't really work, but he took it. He was willing to do anything to clear his name. There was really nothing to stake on him. Just that he was the last person to have a relationship with Elizabeth to have seen her. So that's my second suspect. Do you think he could have done it?
Honestly, it just seems like it was a random friend she made here and there along the way. Obviously, he had interest in her, but no, honestly, I don't think he did. There's just a lot of missing details here and there. Not a lot to go off of, honestly.
What if I told you that in 1986, on January 9th, Robert died in his apartment of an accidental fall? Does that change your thought process?
Potentially. I mean, it could be a suicide.
You think he
Tell me
killed?
more about this accidental fall.
There's not much information on it. There was just an accidental fall at his apartment in Anaheim.
39 days later.
39 years.
How much to go off of there? Oh, 39 years. My apologies. No, not really. In my opinion, it's not too much to go off of there. I mean, if it was an accident, it was an accident, but it could have been potentially suicide. You never know. Doesn't sound like it though.
Okay. Now I'm gonna go to my third suspect. This is probably one of the most well-knowns. The third suspect was Dr. George Hodel, and a lot of people think he's a murderer, including none other than Steve Hodel, a retired cop and son of George Hodel. So Steve Hodel believes his own father was a murderer, and he was a retired cop too. So the thing about George Hodel was he was a very wealthy man in LA. He ran a clinic. He's been described as very charismatic, high IQ by many people. He ran a venereal clinic like venereal disease clinic. So he had a lot of knowledge of people's like sex life, like sex workers and like
very personal.
yeah, very. So he had a lot of knowledge. So he could have had information to blackmail a lot of people. He was that kind of person. High IQ, wealthy, power. It all started when after the doctor's death, Steve was looking through his dad's stuff and he found 2 pictures of a girl that looked a lot like Elizabeth. A lot like Elizabeth. So that made him start thinking and digging a little deeper and deeper and deeper. Because remember, the way that she was murdered, someone with some medical expertise definitely did the murder, because the way everything was cut, the way the body was drained. So,
and the way it was put out on display.
Dr. George Hodel studied to be a surgeon in medical school, and he passed it with no problem. So he had the knowledge to do so. That's Steve's first point. Another point is Steve suggests that his dad was a serial killer, perhaps, that he may have murdered multiple people, because on February 10th, so a couple weeks after Elizabeth Short's body was discovered, another body was discovered. This body belonged to Jean French. It was also found in an empty lot, nude, almost the same pose. And in her body, with lipstick, was written the initials BD. Many people think it stood for Black Dahlia, because at that moment, everywhere you went in LA, Black Dahlia, Black Dahlia. So Steve hired a penmanship person. I don't know what the actual title is, but an expert to see if they match. He said the known handwriting of the doctor matched the one from the lipstick. But now, you remember that person was hired by Steve. So it's a little like, you know, it's a bit like if I hire you to prove my own point, you know? So that's where he goes. But what is left out of a lot of places, because a lot of places talk about this, what is left out is that it's not the complete message on the body with lipstick. The complete message read, fuck the BD. So everyone was like, oh, fuck the Black Dahlia. But a lot of people say that D does not look like a D. It looks like a P. So it could have been fuck the DP. What's the DP? The police department. So I don't know if I fully buy the lipstick was definitely a clue. But another thing that Steve says is weird, that his father, on January 9th, the same day that Elizabeth disappeared, had 50 sacks of concrete sent over to his house for construction purposes. It's just a little weird coincidence that because he says that a sack of concrete like the ones he received was found at the lot where Elizabeth Short's body was found. So he says that's how he transported the body in one of those sacks. So that's what he says. Another thing to quote, the doctor, George, drove a black car that matched the description given to the detective by the anonymous tips that was seen at the area of the lot.
The death.
So so a lot of things are kind of piling up, but I'm thinking about this. What if Steve is just doing this as a personal vendetta against his father, because he was not a good father. He was kind of a shit dad because of the way he treated a sister of Steve. So one of George's daughters claims that he made her pose nude for a friend of his to take photos, and that when she was 11, that was when she was a child. When she was 11, her father George tried to teach her about oral sex, and that at 14, George was offering her to his friends for sex. She even claims that he had sex with her multiple times. She ran away from home when she was 15. She sued her father and everything, but the rest of the family testified against her. Many testified that It was because he was the money maker, the breadwinner. What is known is that she had a baby around that age of 15. Many say it was her own father's baby. She gave up for adoption, that kid. So,
Wow.
not a great guy, right?
No, far from it.
Well, it gets deeper with him because after hearing the claims of Steve, a reporter wanted to dig a little deeper. So he went to the Los Angeles DA office where he was given access to the case files. He found pictures of George Odell. He was an actual suspect back then. So he was among 21 other suspects. What he found out, because he kept looking like, well, what happened? Because he was a suspect. I want to read more into the investigation they did in George. It turns out the police managed to get bugs, like microphones, inside his house.
Yeah, of course.
So for 40 days, they recorded his conversations. And one transcript, because the recordings are gone, they disappeared. No one knows what happened to them. Many say that George blackmailed a lot of the police to get rid of those recordings.
Honestly, that's what I was thinking.
One of the transcripts from the recordings said, quote, suggesting I did kill the Black Dahlia. They couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary because she's dead. Her secretary died of an overdose, a very iffy drug overdose. So how do you have that transcript, that recording as a police officer and not do anything about it? It disappeared, the recording. So that's really iffy. Another thing about George that was a little weird, when this was going on, he ended up moving to the Philippines. He like ran away. So he moved into the Philippines. And in the Philippines, a murder happened that was very similar to the Black Dahlias. And Steve says it happened less than half a mile away from his current house, where a woman was found on the lot, naked, nude, almost on the same
That doesn't sound like a coincidence to me right there.
Yeah.
Sounds way too similar.
So
sounds like he did it.
That's pretty much the theory that Steve says that his own father was a murderer.
But then that begs the question: why didn't he turn his own father in? I mean, obviously, he stated that he didn't have enough evidence.
He didn't
but
know until his father passed away, because he moved to the Philippines, but he came back to the United States. He passed away. And when he passed away in the early 90s, that's when Steve started going into... Steve was already a retired cop at this point. When his father passed away, he started going through his stuff, and that's when he got suspicious that it could have been him.
That's crazy.
Now, he did write a couple books and did make some money out of this theory. So, do you think that the murderer of the Black Dahlia could have been George Odell?
It sounds like it very well could have been. There's too many similarities based on what you just told me. The body that they found in the Philippines, not too far away from his home. The fact that he may have treated her as well, and other individuals, prominent individuals. Sounds like he knew how to get away with it because he had information on everyone. Could have easily blackmailed a lot of people, especially having that really close private info. Let's be honest, sometimes people in high status jobs or how would you say this, not platforms, but someone with high status, let's say politically, they can get up to no good. We know modern day politicians
when you know
can
people,
be very
it's easier to get away with things.
Yeah, exactly. When you know people, get away with things. When you know their dark little secrets, it's easy to blackmail them. Hey, you do this or this, and I won't let out information about how you, hypothetically speaking, obviously, how you slept with this lady to your wife or your family. Or I won't let your friends or mother and father know about this particular sensitive information. So it sounds like it could have very well been him, and he could have pulled some strings here and there to get away with it. So
that's your final guess? Do you think it was George Odell?
I'm gonna assume it was him.
Well, as it stands right now, he's the most popular candidate in many people's eyes, but it's an open case, though. It's still unsolved.
Still unsolved, yeah, because we don't have...
I just want to take a moment to think about her last 4 years of her life. How many things could have gone differently that she might have lived? If her father didn't contact her, she probably wouldn't have moved out and dropped out of school and moved in with him. If her fiance wouldn't have died,
Might have passed away.
he would probably stay in Florida. If when she was in San Diego, if she didn't call someone to come pick her up to drive her to LA, she could have, there's so many little tiny little things. If she wasn't evicted from the house, she could have lived. It's just a sad story, really.
Yeah. So many things went wrong for her in her life, and
Yeah, I mean,
towards the end, it
look,
basically just
I
went
don't
downhill.
know if George Odell did it. I don't know if he murdered, but all I know is that he was a real piece of shit. It looks like it from what he did to his own daughter. And another thing I forgot to mention. In the recordings that the journalist was looking through, there was a transcript that was said to describe the sounds of a screaming woman coming from the basement.
Oh man.
I mean, if he didn't murder Elizabeth, he sure as hell murdered someone.
Yeah. That sounds like it. He knew. Well, if he had gone to school to become a surgeon, he knew basically how to cut people up, where to cut them up. He basically knew how to drain people's blood. He knew everything, from what it seems like, and it's just too. It's just too. What is it? Too not coincidental. I'm a loss for words here, but it
It's
just
too many
comes together too
things. Too many
well.
things.
Yeah, too many little coincidences, I guess you could say.
Yeah, but it's just that
Once again, lost for words.
I still don't buy 100% the whole thing, just because it is his own son telling the story, and it clearly looks like his son did not care for his own father.
Well, do you maybe think that even if he didn't care for his father, that might push him more towards trying to find out and trying to prove if his father did do it? Essentially, he could have a grudge on his father, and it could be that grudge that's pushing him to say, "Hey, no, this is in fact him, and I'm desperately trying to find all the information I can to prove that it was in fact him, so I can prove to myself that he really was this monster that I know he was or think he is, or was. I apologize because he passed away too. Um, it could be you could be onto something, but it could also be that he's just trying to put out there just how much of a monster his father really was. That's
Yeah,
my 2 cents on the situation.
yeah. It was just
You know?
I mean, yeah, a lot of shitty things happen. Like, I still can't get out of my head the thought of someone calling her mom, Elizabeth Short's mom, with a lie of like, "Hey, beauty contest winner, give me the information." Then finding out, yeah, she didn't win a beauty contest. She got murdered pretty brutally. Jesus,
And I wonder if, yeah,
that's messed up, man.
that is messed up. Of course, I believe that actually changed some laws afterwards, because
Yeah, they did.
uh, yeah, that's right, it did. 'Cause now it's yeah, I think you mentioned something about it, and I heard something about it too. Uh, I don't remember exactly what they changed, but now it's a lot harder for people to get information, particularly the press.
Yeah. Well,
That's
that's all the information I had on this case. Hopefully you guys learned something new today. Hopefully you guys liked our version of the retelling of this story.
it's a lot of intricate details in there. A
Yeah,
lot of very interesting information. Everything from the way she was put on display, to the potential suspects, or the suspects, and the potential lead suspect in the case. All the crazy information that's known about him through his family, and potentially other people who he was involved with on a personal level, whether that be career and in his personal life. Just a lot of little interesting facts here and there.
yeah. Well, that's our time, folks. Thank you for joining us on our first episode. And next week we got a very special episode for you. We're going into a ghost story. Well, could have been a demon story, perhaps.
Ooh.
You'll find out next week and
Ooh.
Whispers in the Dark.